Motherboards. A motherboard is the most complicated component in a computer. When building motherboards from scratch, generally you need to pay attention to form factors, processor sockets, chipsets, buses and numbers of bus slots, and other connectors, slots, and ports. Form factors. Form factors is the specification of the motherboard, dimensions, power supplies, location of mount holes, number of ports on the back panel, and etc. The most popular motherboard form factors are the standard ATX, which we will be looking at today, micro ATX, and mini ITX, also known as ITX. Form factors, the three boards, the three boards can be fit into an ATX computer case and use ATX power supplies. The ATX full size, the standard size, is up to 12 inches by 9.6 inches. The popular form factor in many versions and variations. The micro ATX up to 9.6 inches by 9.6 inches, a smaller version of ATX, and the mini ITX up to 6.7 by 6.7 inches, small form factors, low-end computers.
What's going on, everybody? And today I will be explaining about the CPU and processors. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is the CPU? CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. And when you think about it, it processes a series of instructions for execution. Now, before you think about anything, this is not too in-depth. This is just basic knowledge for you to understand what are certain types of processors for your motherboards. And what I'll be explaining to you is the types and characteristics of processors. The first features that you got to understand about processors is clock speed, the processor supports. Now, when you think about it as automotive, as a car. A car, when you buy from the factory, is stock. Now, when you compare it to CPUs, you can overclock things. So at 1.8 gigahertz, you could overclock it to 2.0 or 2.5 just by certain modifications and certain abilities to customize it based on your taste of performance. The second feature I like to explain is the processing speed. Pretty much is measured in gigahertz, and it's just, like I said, the ability for the CPU to process information at a certain speed. The third feature is socket and chipset for processors. And this is totally different for the fact that you got two different manufacturers, which is primary Intel and AMD. And with these different processors, it has different features and different socket sizes and stuff like that. So we will explain that a little bit later. The fourth feature is processor architect. Now, when it comes to computers, there's 32 bits and there's 64 bits. So it's totally two different variations of it based on speed and based on customizations. The fifth feature is multi-processing abilities. Now, when it comes down to that is motherboards have a whole different variety of things. Now, for this motherboard, as you may see, has a heatsink and a fan on top of its CPU. Here, what I'm going to show you is the CPU, the Central Processing Unit. Now, as you can tell, for you to remove it, there's a lever on the side. What you do is you press down on the lever slightly, move it slowly, lift it up, and as you can tell, this is the CPU, Central Processing Unit. This is pretty much the baby of everything. This is the brains of the computer. As you can tell, it is currently running Intel i5. I'm not sure if you could be able to see it, but this is the CPU that is running currently. And also, to understand about CPUs, something that, is good for your motherboard, you got to understand the characteristics of the CPU and the socket itself. As you can tell, if you look closely, there's two different types of style sockets. One is called PGA, which is Pin Grid Array. What that means is it has holes that are lined in rows on the socket. So as you can tell, if you look closely, there's actually pins on the socket, and which eventually aligns to the CPU when placed on the socket. Now, there's a disadvantage about it for the fact that once the CPU, if you put it incorrectly, it will bend the pins, which does not make a really good connection, so that's horrible. But, even now today with i5s, i7s, Intel processors, they still use it, You just got to be delicate and read the manufacturers, as you should know. But yes, that's just a basic general idea of processors and socket sizes.
Many of the chips seen on the motherboard are part of a specific chipset, which control memory, motherboard buses, and some peripherals. Because these chipsets work closely with the CPU, they must be compatible with the specific processor and generation or series. The most common chipsets are produced by Intel, which has just released the 5th generation of its popular Core series of CPUs and chipsets. The previous generations, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generations, were known as Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge, and Haswell, respectively.
The buses of a computer collectively transfer information from one component to another, be it a memory address, a piece of data, or a control command. The three major divisions of control buses, or of computer buses, are the address bus, the data bus, and the control bus. Let us look at each. The address bus connects the CPU and the system memory together by way of the North Bridge memory control. When the CPU requests data stored in memory, it does so by asking for information stored at a particular memory address. The data bus connects the CPU to other devices on the system, including memory. The data bus transfers data between the components to be either read or written. The control bus connects between these components and sends a control signal telling the component whether it is to read or write. Attached to the North Bridge is also the PCI bus. The PCI, or Peripheral Component Interconnect bus, allows for additional components to connect to the system bus and act as native components of the system. The PCI expansion has evolved from standard PCI, which uses a parallel bus architecture, to PCI Express, which uses a serial architecture, offering many improvements over standard PCI.
Back panel connectors and ports. Connector at the back end of the computer where you plug in external things such as printers, keyboards, and modems. It also displays ports, audio ports, and USB ports, and more. This allows the computer and the device to follow instructions to each other, sometimes also known as input and output ports. If you look back here, you can see at the back end of the motherboard, these are where the ports are. Now we're going to talk about BIOS. Before we get into it, we're going to talk about the BIOS battery, which is a lithium battery. An example would be CR input-output system. System BIOS is a chip located in all motherboards. The chip is containing of instructions and set up for how systems should boot and also operates. Now if you look on the motherboard, you'll be able to find that the BIOS chip is right here. Alright. Video memory. Before an image could be sent to the display monitor, it first is in a bitmap, in the area of a video memory called the frame buffer. The amount of video and memory controls the maximum resolution and color depth.